Bill Belichick is the greatest football coach of all time, though admittedly, he's been in the news a little too much lately for things other than winning football games. While coaching the New England Patriots, he won a record 6 Super Bowls, which is more than any of the other 31 franchises in the NFL over the past 60 years. One of his most famous maxims is in order to win, you must first learn how not to lose. In the personal finance world, people seem to have a difficult time grasping this lesson. I am constantly amazed at how common it is for people to play games that are blatantly rigged against them. Perhaps the greatest example of people playing games that are blatantly rigged against them is the recent rise of prediction markets. The two biggest companies are Polymarket and Kalshi, which I'm sure you've heard of at this point. Both seem to offer bets on just about anything, from who's going to win the state gubernatorial election, to what is going to be the high temperature in Miami today, to who is going to be a bridesmaid at Taylor Swift's wedding. These kinds of bets might seem fun and lighthearted, but there's one factor that should make anyone wary of wagering any amount of money: insider trading. From what I can tell, Polymarket and Kalshi don't really take any steps to prevent insider trading. And quite frankly, I'm not sure if there's anything they could do to prevent it. Creating an account is a simple process that takes just a few minutes. You do need to provide identification, but you do not need to disclose stuff like where you work. And even if you did, it would be near impossible to prevent people from using beards, i.e., using other people to make bets on their behalf. Perhaps the biggest insider trading scandal on prediction markets recently was when the US deposed Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. On a $32,000 bet that was made just a few hours before President Trump announced that Maduro had been ousted, an account on Polymarket made $436,000. Ask yourself, would any everyday American bet $32,000 on the ouster of the leader of Venezuela? Is there a person out there who just follows the news closely and studies the data and the analytics on geopolitics? Of course not. No one is making a bet that large on something so unknowable to the everyday person unless that person has inside information. Why would you bet even $1 on something like this when you are probably competing against at least one person who has direct knowledge of what is going to happen? It's absolutely bonkers. This isn't like some sporting event where you can have a pretty good level of confidence that the players and teams are fairly competing against each other and the outcome is uncertain. With a military operation like the Maduro one, there is a group of insiders that know what is going to happen. The game is rigged against you, so why are you playing? Another example of rigging with prediction markets has to do with how bets are settled. The US attacked Iran recently, and in the process killed Ayatollah Khomeini. A bet had been available on Kalshi on when the Ayatollah would be quote out as Iran's supreme leader by a certain date. When multiple news sources confirmed the death of the Ayatollah, people who had bet yes thought they were going to be paid out. But then Kalshi announced that the bet had excluded being out by reason of being killed. Apparently, this had not been disclosed on the bet until after it had been posted, meaning many people had made their bets without this knowledge. There was a huge backlash as the supreme leader has a lifetime tenure, and so people wondered how else the Ayatollah would be out. Legally, derivatives markets in the US aren't allowed to offer contracts on assassinations. Kalshi ended up reimbursing anyone who lost money on the bet, and apparently took a $2.2 million loss to do so. I think the most shocking thing to come out of this whole episode was the amount of money that was wagered. Take a moment and come up with a guess. How much money do you think was bet on whether Ayatollah Khomeini would be out as the supreme leader of Iran? The answer is $54 million. For some perspective, $135 million was bet on the most recent Super Bowl. We all know America loves football, but just in case you weren't sure about how big prediction markets are getting, that Ayatollah Khomeini bet got 40% as much action as the Super Bowl. Despite gigantic issues with insider trading and unreliable adjudication on the settlement of bets, Polymarket and Kalshi are thriving. At the time of me making this video in early March 2026, there is news that both companies are seeking fundraising with a valuation of around $20 billion. A valuation of $20 billion would make both Kalshi and Polymarket more valuable than companies like Southwest Airlines, Best Buy, and Domino's Pizza. Even though geopolitical bets like Maduro's ouster in Venezuela and Ayatollah Khomeini's killing in Iran have made headlines, the most common bets on Kalshi and Polymarket are actually sports bets. The major players in sports gambling, DraftKings and FanDuel, are now facing major competition. Sports gambling was legalized at the federal level in 2018 and has since become a gigantic industry. And while sports gambling on prediction markets are a bit different, sports gambling on apps like DraftKings and FanDuel are similarly rigged against you. Here's the blunt truth about sports gambling on DraftKings and FanDuel and similar apps. If you demonstrate any actual skill, you will be limited on what you can bet and perhaps even outright banned. It sounds insane, but it's true. Here is what the sportsbook BetMGM had to say in front of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission in 2024. Quote, BetMGM limits approximately 1% of Massachusetts patrons presently. It is our ability to limit that small minority of advantage players that allows us to continue to offer competitive lines and competitive odds in a wide variety of markets for 99% of non-advantage players that play with us. Let me translate that for you into plain English. Sportsbooks need to limit people who win too much because otherwise they wouldn't be able to make enough money off the losers. And boy, these sports books are making tons of money off the losers. A 2024 study published by Southern Methodist University tracked over 700,000 sports gamblers across 11 states for a 5-year period between 2019 and 2023. Fewer than 5% of players ended up profiting, i.e., withdrawing more money from the app than they had deposited. In other words, about 95% of people ended up losing money. Are you really going to gamble on sports and try and get into the top 5% who actually end up making any money? And if you do somehow end up in the top 5%, what are you going to do when these sports books limit the amount of money that you can bet? I see a ton of outrage about how much societal damage is being done by prediction markets like Kalshi and Polymarket and sports gambling apps like DraftKings and FanDuel. But people have to wake up and realize that these games are rigged against them. I'm not necessarily against passing better laws or something, but it's not like there's a gun to anyone's head forcing him to place a bet on any of these services. There's a lot of uncertainty in life. Who knows if the business you started will pan out? Who knows if you'll survive the next round of layoffs? Who knows if the investment you made will actually pay off? But one thing we know for certain is that prediction markets and sports gambling are rigged against you. There's no way to win any significant amount of money over any meaningful period of time. Why play a game that is rigged against you? What do you think? Does this apply to your life? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.